I definitely think there's a cross section of opinions, and it's funny because as there's been discussion about his future here this offseason, I always kind of crack up when I see social media because I see people who say, if you guys if you guys trade Zion, I'm canceling my season tickets and I'm never coming back to another game. And then there's people who say, if you keep him next season, I'm canceling my season tickets and I'm never coming back.
Okay, welcome to the daily basketball recap off-season edition. It is our honor to have Jim Eichenhofer here with us. Jim, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me, guys. Looking forward to talking Pelicans with you.
It's gonna be great. There are few people in the world, and I say that the entire world, who have more to say about the Pelican than you. Who have a wiser thought about the Pelicans than you. So I'll quickly just recap their season in two sentences, and then I'll let you kind of start us off. They were 21-61 this season, second to last place in the Western Conference. They had an over-under of 46.5 before the season, which is a brutal under. Uh, Bill Simmons talks about this a lot, the season from hell. That might be the way to talk about these guys. Zion, CJ, Murray, Brandon Ingram. It felt like the whole team at some point was injured. Um, and there's a lot of hype around this team. When they're healthy, they could be really good, but that was not what happened this season. So I would love to hear, Jim, I guess, to start off, just general thoughts on this season and maybe like a letter grade for what you would give what we're doing for all our what we're doing for all our we're gonna try to do this with every team. So yeah,
Yeah.
let's get started.
Yeah, I mean, I think season from hell is pretty accurate. It was kind of unbelievable the stream of events that occurred to have you go from, like you said, a team that was expected to win in the mid 40s. They won 49 games the season before that. They made the playoffs through the play-in, almost were a top six seed that went down to the last day of the season. Unfortunately for them, they ended up finishing seventh and then got in through the play-in by beating Sacramento in the elimination part of the play-in tournament. So, I mean, it was kind of just unbelievable in so many ways to see how many guys were injured last season, to see, I mean, we talked about this during the season. There's been time you've seen teams across the league have a bunch of injuries. I mean, it's not there's always kind of one or two teams across the league that their season is pretty much decimated by injuries, but it's usually if it's usually not the number of guys that the Pelicans had injured, and it's also not the key part of the rotation too. I mean, we're talking all you listed some of the guys. It was pretty much all of the rotation, the main guys that you thought were going to be prominent going into the season. Every single one of them had an injury where they were out for an extended period of time. So, I mean, that part of it was just something that I don't recall seeing from many teams. The Grizzlies, for example, 2 seasons ago, they had a similar situation, but I don't think it was even as drastic as what the Pelicans experienced. They only had two players who played 65 games. So the NBA's rule where they put in that you have to play 65 to be eligible for postseason awards. Yves Missi was a rookie, 21st pick in the draft. He played 73 games, led the team by a wide margin. Jeremiah Robinson Earl played 66. And beyond that, there wasn't anyone even really that close to 65. So there's a bunch of different stats and numbers that you could pick out. But I mean, it was impossible to compete at the level that you thought was going to be reasonable going into the season. In terms of a letter grade, I mean, my parents were both teachers. I feel like I would give an incomplete maybe because it felt like you never actually had the team on the court that you thought you were going to. I mean, so I would say this was a student that we had to hold back a year, and that they they did so poorly based on what we thought they were going to be able to do and live. They came so far from reaching their potential that we want to see them repeat this grade, come back next year, hopefully a lot more ready to study and ready to you know ace all their tests, and then we'll give a grade from that. But I mean, it was just hard to believe the what we expected and what we got was just so far apart that I'll go with incomplete.
Do you feel that at least it at least gave you some answers in a sense, because between Trey Murphy the third kind of slotting down in position and being able to really open up his game, as well as Zion slimming down and being able to play the three more, and he was able to really run the floor and be much more effective. Like you saw him, be able to maximize the space. Do you feel that at least it gave some pointers to what the future, like a successful mixture could look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a bunch of individual positives that you mentioned a couple. I think Trey Murphy went from a guy that you said he's been his first 3 seasons of the NBA, he's been a complimentary guy, like kind of a secondary offensive option that you love because of his ability to shoot threes, space the floor. This year he added a lot more to his off the dribble game, and he had a stretch where I mean he averaged 35 points against Boston the 2 games that they played against them, where he had 40 in one game and 30 in another. He had a couple segments during the season where he just said he's a different player this year. So he made a big improvement. You mentioned Zion. I mean, obviously, the negative was he only played 30 games, but the positive was that when he was on the floor, he showed again how dominant he is and that he's that all NBA level of player when he is on the court. Eve Messi had a great rookie season, especially considering he was the 21st pick. I thought he outperformed a lot of the players that were picked before him in the lottery. And even there's a few other guys that played well too. They got a bunch of their young players. They had a chance to play. Antonio Reeves is a guy that stands out at the end of the season as well. That played really well over the last month or so. So I mean, I think they increased their depth because there were a bunch of players who played a lot more than they were expected to and will benefit from that experience. I mean, there's some other players that probably weren't going to play at all this season that got to play a good amount because of all the other injuries. So that part could be beneficial. I do think that they'll be deeper next season than they would have been if it wasn't for all the injuries, but that was really probably the only silver lining of having so many guys sidelined.
So thank you for all that. And I have one more question, and then we'll move to the round robin section of this podcast. But and if tell me if this is like too if this is too hard of a question to answer, we could like if you're not allowed to talk about this, we could always edit it out. And maybe this is less about you and more about the fans. But I don't know. I don't have this, but like I have Knicks fans in my life. I have Laker fans in my life. I have Mavericks fans in my life. I have no Pelican fans in my life.
Mhm.
I am genuinely curious. What are the Pelican fan base thoughts on Zion? Are we like, let's trade this guy? Are we like, no, no, no. When he's on, he's one of the best. Let's keep him. Like, what is the city? What's their relationship with Zion Williamson?
I think it's mixed. I think there's people who say by no means do you ever consider getting rid of this guy because he's super talented, and then there's other people that say they I don't have any patience anymore because he's missed so many games over the first 6 years of his career that it's time to move on. So it's hard to say. I definitely think there's a cross section of opinions, and it's funny because as there's been discussion about his future here this offseason, I always kind of crack up when I see social media because I see people who say, if you guys trade Zion, I'm canceling my season tickets and I'm never coming back to another game. And then there's people who say, if you keep him next season, I'm canceling my season tickets and I'm never coming back. So I think, I mean, sometimes we hear the extreme voices the most. The people that are kind of reasonable are the ones that don't stand out as much on social media, which is unfortunate. But I think it's I think a lot of it too depends on how closely you follow the team. I think people who there's kind of I don't know how to explain this. There's people who aren't as bothered as people who don't watch the team. People who follow the team on more of a casual basis aren't as bothered by how many games he's missed because they love watching his highlights and they love seeing his potential. The people that come to every single game, I think that maybe agitates them a little bit more that he hasn't played in as many games. But I will say one thing in his defense. I do think that at the end of last season, if the team was in the playoff race, he might have played more games. It's kind of unfortunate that when you just look at the bottom line of how many games he played, that number could have been higher. But I mean, I think it was one of those things where they were so far out of the race for such a long stretch that it was one of those things where you don't push it. You don't say like, okay, let's go out there and risk him getting hurt. And then the beginning of the offseason, now he has to go through recovery or rehabilitation. So, but that is an interesting question. And I think it's just hard to say because there's so many different opinions and perspectives on that. And trust me, I hear them all the time from people in person that come up to me and say like, they got to trade him, or they say that they got to keep him. So it's been a discussion, I think, for not just this offseason, but going back a few years.
I think a piece of that is also very interesting to me that I'm sure that you're also experiencing is that like I feel like as time goes on and the team holds on to him, right? The asset that he is also doesn't become the sole focus of what the team has to offer as well. So it becomes much more of like a flexible topic, even which is even more like enticing to discuss and really think about. Okay, maybe we move on from him, maybe we keep him. So it's very
Yeah, I mean, the word that you used when you said asset is really important too, because it's like people have, for example, people ask about the draft year in and year out. They say, hey, are the Pelicans going to, Jim, are the Pelicans going to keep their pick? Or are they going to draft at the spot that they're picking at? And I always say it's impossible to predict because you don't know the offers. So you can't, it's hard to predict any trade possibility until you know what's on the table. And so, I mean, I think that part of it is always a factor in everything. I think it's totally reasonable for anyone to say, why would you trade this guy if you're not going to get that much back in return, when you see his ceiling and you see his upside? Like I said earlier, that when he's at his best, he's one of the probably top 5 or 10 players in the NBA. People would, I'm sure, would argue with me maybe on that number, but I mean, there's no doubt that he's one of the best. He's definitely an all NBA player when he's on the court and he's, in the kind of condition he was in. So, I mean, do you take a guy that has that kind of ceiling and say, let's just get rid of him, even though we can't get that back that much because of some of the questions that other teams have about his durability and his availability?
right, especially when over the past few seasons it looks like he's not trying to. He has been ramping up the conditioning and everything like that. Like he's really, making the life
Yeah.
decisions.
Yeah. And 2 seasons ago, he played 70 games. So, I mean, that was his best year as far as being on the court. And it translated to the Pelicans winning 49 games. And like I said, they were within an inch of being a top 6 seed and avoiding the play-in altogether. And then he gets hurt in the play-in game that they wouldn't have even played if they had won even just one more game that season. So, yeah, I mean, you guys don't need me to tell you the luck that this guy has had has been horrific as well, similar to what the team went through overall this past season.
Sure. Amazing. Okay, so let's jump into the categories. So the way we'll do this is we'll go round robin. We'll just go back and forth and say, well, I guess we'll see. So first is biggest moment. So, or positive or negative. Jim, we'll start with you. What was the biggest moment of the season?
The biggest moment of the season, I mean, is difficult in terms of positive. I think it's difficult to pin down. I mean, they had a game December 5th against Phoenix where they finally got back a semblance of it. Zion still wasn't back from injury, but Herb Jones came back from being out for a while. DeJounte Murray had been back for a few games. Herb Jones blocks a Devin Booker shot at the buzzer for them to win by 2. And you're thinking, okay, this team is turning in the right direction. That was, to me, maybe the moment that stood out the most as far as a win in a positive direction.
All right. Great choice. Levy?
I don't know. Yeah, I think it's difficult to exactly pinpoint moment. I think it's like also theme in a sense. I love the fact that coming back from the offseason, everyone kind of looked at Misi and was like, is this going to be the starting center? And he showed out. He really, really held his own. He really provided a lot of firepower. So I enjoyed it. It was good.
Great. I was debating between CJ McCollum's 50-point game and Zion's first career triple-double. So since neither of you said either of them, then I'll just use both as a tie.
No, the Zion triple-double is a great answer. And the CJ 50-point game also. Yeah, I definitely could have gone with those as well.
Yeah, I know exactly what you were talking about. The game you referred to. I remember that game, that Herb Jones block, and because I remember everyone's reaction was like, this is what we wanted, and it was just like didn't happen. But there was, I think I actually, we're not really voting on best answer, but I think yours was the best answer, not to stuck up to our guess. But I remember that game. I forgot about it when I was doing the research, but that game, I remember thinking back, I was like, wow, like when the Pelicans are right, like this looks good.
Yeah, I think, I think part of it too, if you look at the whole scope of the season, the ones that you mentioned were incredible moments, but in my brain, it's hard for me to go to a game that happened after they were kind of already out of the running. You know what I mean? The Herb Jones against Phoenix one, I was still thinking in my mind, it's early enough in the season that they can turn this around and become a postseason contender. So I think that's part of why I went with that one. Unfortunately, by January and definitely by March, there was no chance that they were going to make the playoffs or even the play in.
Most enticing player, Levi, we'll start with you. You may have answered this in category one, but who's
No,
Mhm.
I think actually it's interesting. Similar to the Wizards, you see flashes of all these different young players that are really, really like really have such potential on this team. Um, I Trey Murphy, it's kind of difficult to not go with him, obviously. Um, I really love Alvarado. I really love Alvarado. I think that he's my favorite Pelican. I think he's just so. I love defensive guards. He's awesome.
a great choice. My pick is I'm all in on Herb Jones. I think he's like an amazing defender. I think he I don't know if this is a crazy statement, but I think he's the number one asset right now on the Pelicans because Zion, Zion's probably the best, most talented player on the Pelicans, but I think Herb Jones is stealing with like his how good he is defensively and the potential of what he could become is like I'm all in on Herb Jones. If I'm a GM, he's like if I'm let's say the Bucks, I want like he's the first person I'm naming for Giannis, not Zion. Like I think he's amazing.
I'm going to go with Trey Murphy because I mean, there's a bunch of guys on this team that are young that I'm interested in watching them play next season, but he might be at number one at on my list because I feel like for the most part, Zion's been in the league for 6 years now. I feel like he's reached probably 98% of what we're going to see from him. It's just a matter of just doing it more frequently and playing more games. But I think Trey Murphy, based on the improvement that he made last season, I'm so curious to see what kind of jump he can make next season. Unfortunately, he has a shoulder injury that is affecting his offseason in terms of hopefully he'll be ready for training camp and he'll be back on the court by August or September. But I think Trey Murphy, if you use the word enticing, I think he's the guy that I'm looking forward to the most because I just feel like he still has potential that's untapped from what he's shown his first 4 seasons in the league.
Great choice. Okay, most underrated player. We'll start with me, because it's my turn. I think the most underrated player on the Pelicans is CJ McCollum. I have thought CJ has been underrated since his days with Dame. He's good. The guy gets buckets. He's a good guard, and people just always list him as like a throw in a trade to make the salaries work. Like I think he's a great guy, and no one talks about him.
I don't know about Noah, but I think he also he's a very valuable veteran presence as well. I feel like for this locker room, like again, it's a lot of young players on this team. So it's yeah.
I'm going to go with Herb Jones and I have a very specific reason for that. I do think that in terms of him being underrated, he's not as underrated as he was maybe a year or two ago. Not because of anything he's done on the court, but just because more people have recognized how good he is. I think he's not one of those people anymore that people don't know about. He's not on a Pelicans team that people don't watch that much or that's not on national TV. But he played 21 games this past season. They went from sixth in the NBA in defensive efficiency the previous 2 seasons to 29th this past season without him. So I say he's underrated just from the standpoint of, people talk a lot more about Zion's impact and Trey Murphy and some of the other players. CJ, you guys talked about as well. Another good pick for underrated. Um, but Herb is so needed on the court because he kind of holds everything together on the defensive end. And unfortunately, without him this season, you saw just a drastic drop off in how many stops they could get at the defensive end.
Um, my answer would be I want to give an honorary mention to Jordan Hawkins. I think that he has such a high potential, high ceiling, but I'm a very, very big fan of DeJounte Murray. And I think that people kind of forgot that that was an acquisition that happened in a sense. But I really think that next season he's going to provide so much benefit to this team. And he has, again, like all the capabilities on defense, and he's a great offensive player. And he's just going to be a really, I think, good addition to this team when he's able to be on the court.
So we'll end off, if it's okay, I'll hit you with some rapid fire questions. Is that okay?
Sure. Yep.
All right. And if you can't answer them, just say no comment and we'll just move on to the next question.
All right.
Who would you say is the most vocal leader in the locker room?
That's a good question. I would say maybe Trey Murphy is the most vocal guy. Yeah, I don't. There's definitely CJ is definitely more of a lead by example kind of guy. I don't think he's somebody who is really going to get in people's faces. I think people will. That's one thing I think people have talked about is, does this team need somebody like a Fred VanVleet, who that type of player where you saw during the playoffs where he was screaming at guys on the court and saying like, get in this spot, you're in the wrong spot, or yelling at Alperen Şengün saying like, you need to go stronger to the basket. So yeah, but I don't know if they necessarily have somebody who you would consider to be that type of person or that personality where, they're holding guys accountable. So maybe that's something that some of the players who are already here can kind of grow into. But yeah, that's a good question. I don't think any one guy. Trey Murphy is very vocal. I don't know if I don't think he's either that kind of player where he's going to scream at people. He's more of a laid back personality. We love the guy. But yeah, I like, that's an interesting question though, for sure.
Thank you. All right, next question. Who is the funniest Pelican?
That's also Trey Murphy.
Murphy. You guys know all the answers.
He's one of the, yeah, he's hilarious. I like he has an incredible personality. It feels like a lot of the seasons that he's been here, there's always been 3 or 4 other players on the team that have said that Trey Murphy is my best friend on the squad. So, I mean, he's extraordinarily popular. I like the fact too that if you look at his background, he wasn't one of these guys who in high school was really highly recruited and everybody was telling him how great he was. So he just seems like he has a more of kind of a down to earth, normal human being personality. He's not one of these guys that was treated as a star. He started out his college career at Rice. So I think that it kind of paints his perspective on things a little bit. And his parents are also awesome. I don't know if you guys have seen any of the clips of his parents being around. His mom actually got in one of the press conferences and took the microphone and asked him about missing free throws a couple seasons ago. So that whole family, we love those guys. And but he's definitely the funniest player on the team. There's a couple other guys like Jonas Valanciunas, wasn't here this past season, but before that he was here, and he was also pretty hysterical as well.
Great. Who would you say sets the tone in practice?
I would say probably CJ, because he's just has the most experience. He's the ultimate professional. He's one of these guys that has been around long enough that he spends a ton of time preparing, both physically and mentally. So I think at this stage of his career, he was in the 2013 draft. He's been in the league for 12 years. He knows exactly what he has to do to prepare his body for the season. Going into last year, I remember people commented that he was in exceptional shape for a player at this stage of his career, or for any player. So I think he's probably the one that I would say is the player that is most respected. He's also the president of the Players Association. He's just one of those guys that every single player knows that this guy is CJ's on top of everything. So if you don't want to disappoint him, you want to make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to do, because he's been an example throughout his whole career, including the 9 seasons that he played in Portland, of somebody that I think players across the league understand that the reason he's been in the league this long is because he, takes care of all the details and is professional and prepared for everything.
I remember there was a someone covered it while he was in Portland, that he was very heavily into bar 3 and working on his core stability, and that was like how he like regained his his health from his younger injured seasons, and you see it like translate now as well. Like he's worked on his on everything. He's awesome.
Yeah, he has a very thoughtful perspective, I think, on a lot of things, including his preparation for the season. I know he's talked about that a lot in terms of just, I mean, he's one of the guys. He's the guy on the team that you would least be surprised to hear him talk about analytics too. I know some of the players just toss that to the side and just say, I don't want to overthink everything. I want to just go out and play and be reactive, which I understand that perspective as well. But I mean, CJ's one of those guys that will go through and study like what his numbers are on pull up threes and catch and shoot and from different angles. And, you know, he's just, like I said, he's just really thoughtful about a lot of the ways that he approaches his job.
But he's also good every so often for a great Twitter comment as well. He's like really he's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I think I'm trying to remember there was a one I think his most famous one was "I'm trying, Jennifer."
Yeah,
There's on Twitter that said something about, I can't remember what the criticism was, if it was that they hadn't gotten out of the playoffs or they hadn't gotten to the finals or something like that, and he said, "I'm trying, Jennifer." So that was yeah, he's usually pretty funny.
Okay, so we'll do one more question, and then we could end with your closing thoughts. Who on the team would you say is like has this most Michael Jordan like personality, being super competitive in everything, like cards, video games, like just any type of game? They're like, let's go, I'm winning. Who's got that most competitive out of anyone on the Pelican?
Will you guys be upset if I say Trey Murphy again for this?
Not at all. Not at all. That
lines up.
we did that. That's saying it makes sense. It checks out.
Yeah, I think part of why I keep answering him is because he's I mean, he's been here 4 years. There aren't that many players on the team now that have been here that long, so I feel like I have a good understanding of what he's all about. But he's also extremely engaging with the media. He'll come up to us and talk to us, like, you know, right before practice or during some break of whatever he's doing. But yeah, I think he's one of those guys that one of our beat writers, Will Guillory, who writes for The Athletic, has talked about how Trey Murphy is one of the most confident, not just basketball players, but human beings he's ever met in his life. So he's one of those people that always talks about how he feels like he can excel at a lot of different things, and he's a quick learner. So I'll go with Trey Murphy as somebody who is highly competitive in a lot of different areas.
All right. Daily basketball recap fans, look out for Trey Murphy. You heard it here first from Jim Eichenhofer. Jim, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Levi, Jim, any closing words before we finish on the Pelicans or anything?
I just wanted to ask you, just because this is a thing it's important to me. I really like to look at like the details, maybe people who are like, you know, behind the scenes, people don't understand as much. What are we missing? What is something that you wish people would be paying attention to that you just feel is not getting enough attention, not getting enough eyes?
I don't know if there's a specific thing, but I would say generally I'll put it this way, just from a broad standpoint, I totally understand the negativity and the criticism of the franchise or the team based on the past season. I mean, this is a bottom line industry. The record is what it is. They won 21 games. So I understand that, but I do think at times I feel like you got to take a step back and realize that the season before that they won 49 games. Season before that they won 42. Season before that they only won 36, but they made the playoffs. So I mean, they had 3 seasons in a row where they made the playoffs 2 out of those 3 years, and then had another season where they lost in the play-in the year that they won 42. So basically, long story short, I just want people to have a little bit of patience while understanding that I'm not sitting here at all. I don't want people to misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not sitting here at all and saying like that people who are upset about the 21 win season are wrong or should be quiet. No, you totally have the right to express your opinion, and I understand. But I just think overall, I'm trying to remind myself, even during this offseason, that this team is not that far removed from being competitive. They was 36, 42, and 49 wins enough? No. I mean, they still wanted to make progress from that. Unfortunately, this past season was a giant step in the opposite direction. But I do think that the bones are here for this team to be back in the mix next season as a really competitive team. The other side note, and there's a lot of side notes to this story, but is DeJounte Murray's going to be out probably for a chunk of next season. So it's not like they're going to be able to just kind of pick up where they left off from where they were before last season, but I still think that even factoring in all those different injury issues and players that might either have delayed starts to the season or might not get back on the court until just before training camp, that they have the ability to go back to being a really good team, and that I don't think all is lost. I don't think it's not like the three teams I finished with worse records than them in last season. The Pelicans are not in that group in terms of they don't have a lot to build around. They have tons of young talent. It's just a matter of getting them back on the court. So I think that's probably the thing that I would try to focus on, is just not lose sight of the fact that this team not that long ago was almost a 50-win team during the season in 23-24.
That's great. Thank you, Jim, for coming on. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Levi, for co-hosting and for producing. And I want to thank you for listening. Jim, it was great having you.
Guys, I appreciate you guys having me on. I enjoyed it.
Okay, great. We'd love to have you back. We got to talk after the off season when you're not constrained.
Anytime. I'd be happy to come back on.